Okay, we're live on Facebook, so we're a few minutes late because we've decided to have a little bit of a Zoom integration issue. So thanks Zoom for that. Thank you everybody for joining us. I'm going to introduce my panel in a minute, but first of all, there's just a couple of things that we do just want to cover off. So we're going to be doing a Q&A with you for about 30 minutes or so, all centered around budget and financing in terms of COVID-19. And this call is aiming to provide guidance only. So every situation is different and we can't necessarily get down to very much detail or giving professional advice. However, both of the members of the panel are more than glad to do that for you, should you wish to contact them privately or take on their services. So for now, this is just a free call for everybody to submit any help or advice that we can help to assure them with, really, for now. So let's start by introducing who we have. So Christine, could I come to yourself first in terms of who you are and the business that you have?
Hi, I'm Christine Harwood. I'm part of the team at Accounts Matters based at the White Cross in Lancaster. So we provide services to small and medium businesses in the local area, accounts, bookkeeping, tax returns and business advice.
Okay, thank you very much. And to you, Phil.
Yeah, hi there. My name's Phil Tarbun. I'm the Managing Director of firm Blend Accountants on sunny Morecambe Bay. We do a lot of things accountants would expect to do, and a lot of things you might not do as well. We focus heavily on helping people to grow their businesses, although in this time we're helping people really to survive with their businesses through this time.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of what you're going to be helping with today, what the kind of things that you would like to help our viewers in terms of the kind of advice and things that you've been, I suppose, being asked for already up to now? What kind of things are you hoping that we're going to be doing today on the call?
I think basically today is just really providing a bit more of an update to people on what's happened since we did the last session. There's been a little bit more information released on the furlough scheme and when that's likely to be up and running, and just really generally recapping over some of the stuff we've covered before.
Okay. So in that respect then, in terms of people being able to submit questions, now we've got some questions in advance, haven't we, already, that we're going to go through. So Phil, we've got some questions. Christine, we've got some questions. I know that you've also been asked. In terms of your hopes for this next kind of 30 minutes or so, what are you hoping to help people with?
I mean, we're at a point now, we've been hit with a load of stuff that we've got to implement. We've got a load of things that we now need to look at. I want to give people a bit of hope. I mean, this isn't going to go on forever. The ones who do well through this crisis are the ones that are going to come out stronger at the other end. So I'm trying to get people to think hard about the business and focus not just on the short term, but on what the future is going to hold.
So a bit of longer term planning from your point of view.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we've got some questions. Some of them have been submitted in advance. So I'm just going to literally act as facilitator and we'll take as long as we take. And if anybody else has any questions that they would like to submit, then we know we've got a few people watching right now. So please do submit any questions or comments that you've got, because we are more than happy to help with that. So Phil, it looks like the first question might be, I think, coming to you really. So it's quite a general question, but what is the first thing I need to be doing right now? So I suppose that's about so much info. What would you say as a business owner?
This is about going back to basics. I mean, for the first few weeks, we need to be considering what is going to happen for our business. So I'd say the first thing is getting crystal clear on your cash position. There are some free resources on our website if anyone wants a copy to help them with this. But for a lot of people, you're going to want to do this day by day. Now, all the other questions that you're going to ask regarding the furlough scheme, regarding funding, this will give you a much better line in the sand to know what your requirements are going to be.
Okay. So when you're talking about getting clear on for those people that are watching this and probably aren't necessarily maybe use some more layman's terms in terms. If I said tomorrow, right, okay, you want me to take 3 vital steps just so I know where I'm at. Very simply put, what would those 3 vital steps be, do you think, in your opinion? Then Christine, I'll come to you after that.
Yeah, I'd say, again, set out yourself all your income that you have coming in over the next few months, even if this happens to be nothing, but also include when you realistically think you're going to get funding, like for the furlough scheme, if you haven't had the grant funding, when you think you're going to get that. Then set out your expenses as of now. There's a lot of advice coming out, well, you should cancel all your direct debits. If you want to carry on after this, I would strongly suggest, if you're going to cancel any payments out to people, you have a good conversation with them first, because you don't want to burn your bridges here. Well, that will help you see your pain points of where you are going to run out of money, and even the ones in good positions. If this carries on indefinitely, there will be a point when that is. So all this is to look at where you can have a problem and acting before it becomes a problem.
Okay, so your advice there initially, those 3 things, is listing your finance, so listing outgoing, listing incoming, and then looking at where that potential shortfall might be, and contacting the person to whom you take those services from, and looking at what that might be in terms of a better way forward.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Christine, what about yourself? What would you say in response to that question?
Yeah, so just going on what Phil said there, obviously making sure that you're fully aware of everything that you're entitled to and claim. And I know there are some questions with some clients that I've spoken to around whether they're actually eligible for any of the grants that are available through the council, if they've got premises. So there's 1 or 2 people there need clarity on whether they can claim, and I'm encouraging them to go back to the council and confirm whether that's an option or not. Obviously, around the self-employment scheme, there's still a little bit of clarity needed on how the claims are going to be calculated, particularly where businesses are haven't been operating for the 3 full years that they're planning on basing it on. So getting some clarity and understanding, and getting some support if you need to try and understand what that might mean in terms of cash coming into the business, and laying out what's out there for you. And then, like Phil said, looking at your business incomings and outgoings. You may well have debtors on your books, people that owe you funds now that might actually not be in a position to pay that. What impact's that going to have on your business? So not just looking at what you've got coming in and going out and when it's due, looking at what actually may or may not come in, and keep in touch with your customers, discuss with them, when payments likely to come in, and factor all of those things into your cash flow planning going forward. And then look at where you can plug the gaps. Do you need a short-term overdraft? Things like the VAT scheme, if you're going to defer your VAT for the 3 months, you're going to have to pay that by March next year. How will you pay that? Factoring all these things in. If you're taking a rent holiday for your business premises, you're still going to have to pay that. What terms have you agreed, and how is that going to be funded? And looking, like Phil said, at the longer term, 6, 12, 18 months down the line.
Okay, so it's almost a case of, I suppose, as I'm listening to that, thinking about, is that then a case of almost getting, maybe let's just say the next 6 months as a visual on a piece of paper that says, right, actually, even if it's the rough version, it's a version, isn't it? So that you're able to start to see where those peaks might be.
Yeah.
But you're also able to see where actually, if X customer doesn't pay as they usually do, and it's another 4 weeks, does that 4-week window present me with a problem for my existing payments and suppliers that I may have?
Yeah. Being proactive rather than reactive, and looking at where potential problems are going to arise and figuring out a way of dealing with them. And maybe that's agreeing with your suppliers, extended payment terms because your customers aren't able to pay, and factoring all those things in.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we had a few more people that are joining and watching us now. Can I just ask, if you are watching this and you think that there's somebody else that may benefit from this, if they are self-employed, employed, running a business, or actually some of this maybe just in terms of personal kind of good financing advice, can we ask you to share this now as it's going live, so that then possibly more people are able to see that? We'd also really would like you to answer to submit your questions, because we can respond in real time to questions, and we have some already that we're going to go through. But it'd be really good to get your engagement and get some of your questions answered, so we feel we've provided some value. Okay, so we have had a question as well, which is, the Chancellor has mentioned 20th April for applying for furlough, and then said they would take a few days to do, in inverted commas, fraud checks. just in your opinion, because no one I suppose is really knows, that's the basis of the question from Nicola, which is, what do we think they mean by that? I'm going to probably come to you first, Christine, just your opinion when you've seen that statement.
I suspect it'll just be making sure that the schemes are in place and were in place on the defined dates that have been given, which is the 28th of February. So the scheme has to be registered, the PAYE scheme has to be registered before that date. And also checking that there have been regular RTI submissions on that scheme, so real-time information submissions of the payroll.
Okay, and then I'm going to ask another question on that, but Phil, if you just want to answer that in your terms, Christine.
I mean, the problem is that they're probably going to spend quite a lot of time auditing this for years to come, to be honest with you, because there's lots of different ways. There's people who may potentially try and manipulate their February payment just to go for the funding. Now, even though legislation is right, I've taken legal advice, and that is still under common law fraud, or it's very, very close to. People who've carried on in business, when you're furloughed, you don't do any work. The only exceptions are companies, and there was for some minor statutory duties. I know Martin Lewis has come out and said, well, yeah, but they've said they won't prosecute. That's not really a good defence in court, to be perfectly honest with you. And finally, I suppose it's going to be the people who, because you only get to claim 80%, but it'll be made up to 100%. So also for the amounts that have been calculated correctly. Now, the reality is that they could take years to do this. They'll probably do it in batches, but they will look at it at some point.
Okay, so it's interesting because one of the comments around that has been, you know, when it comes to a director or an owner of a business, there's some essential things, aren't there? So we've actually just referred to those. We've referred to things like, you know, forecasting, finances, suppliers, paying bills, doing payroll. And I know there has been some amount of discussion around, does that mean I can do some essential tasks and still remain technically furloughed? So I don't know whether there's been, I mean, it was a question that we had quite a lot of interest in.
Not only the guidance states in accordance with the Companies Act 2006, which is a very, very limited amount of things. Whether it extends to directors' duties under that, it's not overly clear. So if you take that its most literal sense, you could mean filing accounts and doing the confirmation step, because those are the legal duties. It could just be that, which is why it's very dangerous. I mean, I'm sure people know that directors currently aren't getting a good deal at the moment. Rather than risk it, I would personally be wanting to consider maybe looking at something like universal credit to plug that gaps rather than even risking that kind of thing for the future. Because then you can still do what you choose to do on your business, because that's pure, I believe that's purely income based, what I remember.
Okay, and not wanting to scare anybody in this process, but ultimately, you know, the HMRC does have some far-reaching powers and responsibilities, doesn't it? So if it chose to look into this in more detail, I'm sure there's different priorities for them over the coming weeks, months, years, but it is about not assuming that they're not going to look and ask for more information and clarification. And I don't know, Christine, whether you've got a view on that at all.
There will be some form of auditing going forwards in the future once the scheme settles down. So the claims they'll do whatever checks they need to do initially when the claims are being put in, but there'll be certain criteria that they're asking for, and they are going to release a pack on how to claim and information about eligibility for claiming. There'll be certain check boxes I expect you would have to tick to say you're eligible to claim, you're claiming 80%, etc., that the funds are being paid to the staff, because that's one of the other things that's been brought up. Are employers going to take the money and then not pay the staff? So there's all sorts of procedures in place to deal with things like that. So yes, there will be some form of audit, whether it's on a mass scale or whether it's on a selection basis, or whether it's on you've got to provide returns and evidence as to how and why you claimed what you claimed. Is uncertain at the moment, but it will come.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so we have, please do continue to submit any of your questions. I'm not looking out the way, by the way, I'm looking at another screen here that's giving me the questions. So, but please continue to share this broadcast and please submit your questions whilst we're doing this. Okay, so coming back to some more questions that are down here. So, what do I need to do to improve my chances of getting the loan? Now, this is interesting because obviously this is not the grant, that this is the bank loan scheme, and there's been quite a bit of noise around some of the criteria they're asking people to meet has been felt that they're taking advantage of people's situations, that they're asking for personal guarantees, that there's different interest rates thereafter, after the interest-free period. I know there's been a discussion around the Chancellor extending it from 12 months of interest-free to a longer period, but I'm not sure, you will know better whether or not that's actually been confirmed yet. So what can people do to increase chances? Is it business plans? Is it documents?
The main problem with this has been is that the Chancellor dropped it on everyone and the banks went, oh, we are we? And I think that's the main thing. So the banks have been very, very slow to action. I mean, there's been developments where they're offering, you know, silly interest figures like 12% after the first term. Since then, I think he's come out and said, no, it's going to be fixed as a maximum of 5%. Having to give personal guarantees, but now they've confirmed it won't extend to your residential premises. And a lot of banks have also been trying to sideline people onto their other products. Now, before going on answering the actual question, I do want to make the point that you are supposed to approach your main bank. You do not have to. If they're doing anything that annoys you, there are another 40 plus lenders who you can apply to. And at this point, you know, it's day by day, it's important. And banks have a history of being awkward, should we say. So if you do not know how to apply and how to apply properly to multiple lenders, I suggest getting some kind of broker in place. Ideally, I know with no fee base, it can kind of take the sting out for you. Now, in my experience now, the problem with a lot of the bank legislation, it's a lot of it's hearsay. They change all the time, depending on how it can sometimes be which direction the wind's going. But for the best chance I have found is, I know we mentioned about this cash flow forecast and the cash flow summary. You really want to be doing two. You want to do what your realistic position is now and what it would have been before COVID-19 hit, because that then starts to show where your losses and what you're going to need to tide you over. Now, the banks do not want to overlend. This is not a free-for-all for free money. They don't want to lend an awful lot. They want to lend you what you need. So by getting those two in place, you can start to do a business plan as well. The problem is if you have a business plan at this point, it's likely going to be out of date. I mean, I've just spent last night under the influence of Bailey's redoing my entire marketing plan because it wasn't fit for purpose. It can't be. So I would suggest getting those two bits in place for your cash flow. Going through a broker can give you a much better idea of because they know how the banks work. What I will say as far as the security goes, what I believe is 250,000 is the magic kind of threshold. So up to 250,000, I do not believe they're asking for major security, but they will try and take it if they can do, which is always a bit of a pain. Over 250,000, they're needing security to process claims above. But again, it could change on a regular basis. I know there's another petition going that the government should back 100%. Well, whether that kind of means anything, if they're going to come after the payer first, as in the client versus got the loan, it's kind of irrelevant really if they've already got assets.
Okay. And I think one of the points that we made, and it's worth exploring, Christine, if I can come to you next, is that we did say, didn't we, on this last one, that there will be people and businesses out there that absolutely do need to take advantage of this loan scheme. But by the same token, there are also those that probably don't necessarily need it just yet. We don't know how long this will last, and we don't know where we might find ourselves. And accessing that too soon might have a greater impact further down the line. I don't know whether you want to come back on Phil's point, and if you could just help us with that point.
Yeah, I think it all comes back to understanding your business's finances, understanding where you are now, where you were a month ago, and where you potentially could go under a number of different scenarios. I mean, if we're still in this situation 2 months down the line, it's understanding what impact that's going to have on your business. If we're back up and running in a month's time, what impact is that going to have on your business? So it's getting to grips and getting up to date with all of your business finances and understanding what those figures mean and what the knock-on effect is of COVID to those figures. You know, is your business income going to be cut 100%? Is it going to be cut 50%? Are you still continuing to work? It all comes down to the nature of your business and who your customers are ultimately. So get everything up to date is my advice. Bring everything up to date. Look at the figures. Work with your accountants, your bookkeepers, whoever you work with to help you understand those figures, and then do a plan going forwards, and then look at plugging the gaps with any financing should you need to do so.
And I think that's the point, is plugging the gap. So the advice that I took from both of you last time when we did this, and actually we also took it from Tanya and Annabelle from TP Financial Solutions from a personal point of view, which was don't make decisions and take actions that actually, you know, don't need to be done now. So don't take advantage of this scenario, because ultimately don't borrow more than you need. And anything else, as you've rightly said, in terms of just plug the gap, don't overextend. The same way that Tara and Annabelle talked about, you know, don't make rash decisions. I mean, I know we've got another session coming up with them in a couple of weeks, but don't make rash decisions when actually this may come back round again and it may level itself out.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, if you are going to look at borrowings, you need to understand what the impact that's going to be going forward under various scenarios of what might happen to your business. So it's scenario planning.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So we have another question. We've got, when will the portal be available for the government furlough reimbursement? There's a couple of parts to this question. What do I need to claim, and when will I receive funds? Either of you?
Well, it's supposed to be live on the 20th. Supposed to be.
Okay.
Now, what I will say is all agents have had an email. I'm sure you've had the same on, Christine, which says the date. Clients have had a similar email. It does not have the date on that email, which is a very small point, but still important. My main concern is the thing overheating. However, my business partner, our operations director, is on a webinar today to hopefully get a bit more of an idea of how it's actually going to work. They're making it robust. They're hoping to cope with 450,000 people an hour. And I believe it's looking at 9 million people. The last check was people are going to have to make a claim. There are some extra details that have been published literally in the last 24 hours. There's a bit more online about the things. They've extended it since the agent email last week. But it's the kind of things you'd expect. It's like the pay as you earn office reference, your accounts office reference. They want your own business's tax reference. Like I said, there's a list of the various things on HMRC's website. If you Google HMRC COVID is as good as anything, and that will get you to run out the right location. If there's any doubt, but you need to speak to your accountant. Now,
okay.
There are obviously things.
Sorry, further question. So before any of the people that are watching this, the business owners, attempt to get onto that portal, it would be advantageous to have already either read that criteria advice on HMRC's website for the portal, or spoken to your bookkeeper, your accountant, to know what you need, so that when you are on that thing, because it will overload and it will crash, when you are on, you want to be able to make the best of that connection whilst you're there, rather than having to run around for information. So maybe we could publish to here later on what we believe that list of information is. Yeah,
I mean, a major thing as well is, if your accountant's going to do it, that's fine, but obviously you'll have to factor in their charges. It's reasonable of them to charge, because it is going to be quite a bit of work, particularly for their client base. The way we're doing it is we're giving our clients the information they need to do it themselves, but you will need to set up your own HMRC agent, HMRC client login. And that could take, I think it's usually 5 to 10 working days. It can do. The sooner you get it done, the sooner you can have that in place. So
that's a really good point then. So people could be taking action now, couldn't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's to prepare themselves. Okay. But if Christine, in your case, so you're a bookkeeper, you're bookkeeping or accounting for those clients, so you do a range of services across, you know, from bookkeeping through to the management and accountancy. Yeah. Is that something that any of your team, for example, like Phil's, would actually be able to do that work on behalf of?
So providing the accountant or payroll provider is authorised to act as your agent and has access to your PAYE account through their agent portal, the facility will be there for us to do the claims on behalf of clients, and some clients have already asked us to do that. As Phil says, if they want to do it themselves, unless they've already got a government gateway account that gives them access to that payroll scheme, they will have to register for one to be able to do it for themselves. So yeah, it is a service we're offering, and we're just dealing with it on an ad hoc basis as clients come through. Obviously all of the information is processed through the payroll, so if clients are wanting to do it on their own, that information would need to be made available to them for them to be able to do that. I think that's all.
Okay, have we been told or given any indication of what we're looking at for timescales? So it's gone in, they've done it. There's been this talk around 15 days, depending on the timescales. So Christine doesn't look quite as sure about that.
The problem with a lot of this is a lot of it is coming from various forums, and it's like with the coronavirus news, and it rattles me, because where's your source? Where is the official source that says this is the time frame? Because until that's available, I wouldn't not be expecting to get any until at least into potentially in mid-May. I would plan for that as a worst case, maybe even a best case, because you don't want to be relying on that money when other options may be available. You want to get finance in place before it becomes, absolutely critical.
So that goes back to our point you made earlier around that forecasting, doesn't it? In going out, going. So actually, when you are doing that forecasting, is there something there that says, actually, let's plan for this not happening when it should. Let's plan for this being at the end of May, for example, and then you can make other key decisions around your finances based upon a worst case scenario. If just to ask you both, if then once they've done that and they're on the portal and they've submitted all their information, is it almost becoming like a payroll scenario in that each month then do they need to renew that for that information, or do we know that yet, or will it just continue to drop in terms of fund?
The claim process, the minimum claim period is 3 weeks. So when the portal opens, any claims submitted need to be for a minimum of 3 weeks, and they're looking at backdated claims initially. Thereafter, when any new claims are being put through, they can only be submitted they can't be submitted any more than 14 days before the payroll date is run. So there will be a process whereby payrolls could potentially be run early, bearing in mind we don't actually know how long people might be furloughed for, depending on how long lockdown goes on for. So that's one word of caution, is we don't want to run payroll too early to calculate the furlough pay, to then claim the furlough pay so that it comes in time to pay it. So 14 days is the key date, but be cautious on running payrolls too early and claiming furlough pay unless you're absolutely certain that furlough period is going to extend to the date that you're claiming the furlough pay for.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think there are probably quite a few people watching this sort of think, actually, we thought that was quite straightforward, this furlough portal, but it's sounding like there's quite a little bit more to it. So I don't know about anybody else, but I'd certainly be going to the accountant to help me with that bit, I think. So the next question is, I've made a loss over the last few months. Do I have any options? I'm not sure quite what that's in relation to. I don't know whether that talks in terms of in relevance to a claim or in relevance to the books.
I think,
Phil, I don't know whether
it's meaning, I've started to lose money. I'm loss making. What can I do? There's a couple of options. I mean, one option is to shorten your accounting period to crystallize any kind of losses. You can set losses back 12 months prior. In general, there's different rules for self-employed and limited companies, but in general, you can offset your loss back and potentially release some cash now. The important thing is if you've got cloud accounting software, which a lot of people will have now, stuff like Xero, you can work with your accountant to get you really, really the best result for your cash flow.
Okay. So I'll come to you in a second, Christine, but I suppose what I've taken from that really is that's not just about the business, that's around really taking professional advice around how best you manage that loss and how best you plan going forward. I don't know, Christine, whether you've got anything that you would add to that.
I guess it depends on why the loss is originating. If it's come through because as a result of COVID, it's looking at the longer term future of the business and whether it can recover. And then that comes on to what Phil was saying about, if it isn't going to recover, is it the point at which you need to take the decision that perhaps the business isn't going to be viable going forward, and then work with your tax advisor to look at how that will impact based on previous year's profits, losses, and whether there's any tax relief that you can obtain through that. If the business is potentially viable beyond COVID, it's looking at what other options you've got and looking at it comes back to your planning and your cash flow again, and your financial modelling to look at the viability of the business.
Okay. And then another question that I know I've been asked, and probably you may, I'm assuming you've been asked, is the grant situation. So for those small businesses that got small rate relief, that got the £10,000, some of them actually in Cumbria are still waiting for the £10,000, I believe, but I think we've been very fortunate. Lancaster City Council seems to do it pretty quickly. But if this goes on much longer, do we see a second payment or another form of some kind of, because for a lot of people, £10,000, while seeming very generous 4 weeks ago, is starting to feel perhaps, not, it's a worry for people going forward, isn't it now?
It is, and I think it's one of those we just don't know at the moment. It's just so uncertain. I mean, the 3-month point seems to be a key date that keeps being bandied around in various scenarios. Everything seems to be looking at a 3-month period. So I think that's the point at which, if we're still in this situation, we'd be looking at what other support the government can offer. I don't think they're thinking, or not publicly anyway, beyond that period at the moment.
Okay. Phil, anything to add to that before we go to the next question?
No, not majorly. I mean, again, I completely get the 3 months. Everything's based on 3 months. The furlough funding is approved for 3 months. They have got a clause that may extend it if necessary. But yeah, I'd expect after the 3-month period, that's when we're going to start seeing around July time or leading up to the end of June. Hopefully that's when we'd see extra support if we needed it.
Okay. And then for those people that are watching this that may be self-employed, it's continuing to be a slightly woolly topic, I think. Is there anything in terms of clarification that you could give, or what we know a little bit more about now than we didn't last time we did our broadcast? Christine, if I could come to you, have you got any further clarity about the self-employment now?
Yeah, there isn't a vast amount of new information out there. There's been a little bit of information explaining on how it's going to be calculated. So let's take the example of somebody who's got 3 years worth of tax returns from 16, 17, right up to 18, 19 submitted. They will take the total profit on those tax returns, divide it by 3, and then a quarter of that will be the amount of, a quarter of it at 80% will be the amount of grant that will be claimed. For those businesses that are haven't been running for 3 years up to the end of the 18-19 tax year, so for example, if they've been running for 1.5 years, they would take that. There'll have been 2 years tax returns submitted. So my understanding is they would just divide the profit on those 2 tax returns by 2. So even though it's an 18-month period, and then you would, a quarter of that would be what the 80% was based on. Obviously, we know that anybody who started trading in 1920 won't be entitled to claim. Dividends aren't covered, and rental income isn't covered.
Thank you. Phil, anything to add?
Yeah, there's a bit of a major flaw in this. I mean, there's flaws over the place in particular. The actual calculation of it, as I understand it, and I think they've published some more guidance literally not too long ago, is going to be the taxable profit. Now, the key thing on that is, if say you think, well, I made 15 grand that year, but I bought a van which is worth 15 grand, your accountant will likely have claimed you a decent amount of capital allowances, which is essentially claiming allowances up front on that asset. And it's after that claim has been made. So you may think you've got a decent amount of profit to recover. Your taxable profit could be a much lower figure. And what they've said is any amendments to any of those returns received after the 23rd of March will not be taken into consideration and recalculated. So you're stuck with it, unfortunately. I would add for 90 people who started to trade in 1920, which is another major hole. On the actual broadcast, the Chancellor did say, apparently, that they will consider any cases, any people who've started afterwards who may have been affected as a result of COVID-19. There is nothing in any kind of guidance anywhere. But what I would say is guidance is usually based on legislation. We're doing everything in reverse nowadays. So I would be suggesting people to maximize their chance. I'm doing this for a client now who's, ironically, her profit has increased in 1920. She was doing nothing for 8. I mean, people whose businesses exploded in 1920, they're getting overlooked criminally as well. So I'm suggesting get your figures in, write to your tax office, at least to have some kind of hope to put some kind of backing in. Look, this is, we have lost more money as a result of this. Like I said, you can't be guaranteed of anything at this stage, but at least you're doing everything that you possibly can, and it doesn't hurt having those figures in place for your liability for January next year.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question from Jeanette, but I'm not entirely sure. You both of you may understand this a bit better. I have asked for some more clarification so that she may respond in a second. But as my percentage of self-employed is 49.87%, over 3 years, will I get the grant? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, I guess it comes down to how strictly the rules are applied by HMRC. If they round it and get a 50-50 split, there's a possibility. Again, it comes back to Phil's point there. It's the guidance is there as guidance. If Jeanette was to then contact HMRC, let's say she didn't get the letter saying she was eligible to claim, if she was to apply to HMRC, they may consider those kind of cases. But again, we don't actually know at this point. The cut-off point is 50%. So the rules say that if your self-employment income is 50% or more, then you're entitled to claim the grant. If it's less than 50% of your total taxable income, you're not. So obviously that one's very borderline.
Okay. Okay. So as you rightly say, if they round it up, then Jeanette might be fine. If they don't, then no issue. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Are there any other claims which I can make, and can I speed up getting the funds? So there are other pots available, aren't there? R&D stuff.
For this, I'm not talking about. This is a good time to revisit fairs. We're going through all of our clients and assessing. Can we look at stuff like R&D claims? Can we look at stuff like any other various things that may have been overlooked before? If you extend kind of any definitions of what you can claim for R&D. R&D is a very kind of a woolly area with what qualifies and what doesn't. So a lot of things that may not be worth asking your accountant before, because you think, oh, well, I'm not sure if I qualify. Ask your accountant. They probably, if they don't do it themselves, they've probably got links to somebody who does, to see if there is something you can do. Again, you can look at stuff like shortening your accounting period as well to crystallize those quicker and bring those funds back in. One of the things I've learned is HMRC have dedicated more resources. They're anticipating more R&D claims as well for research and development over this time. So they have allocated resources to them, and they're aiming at a turnaround time of about 6 weeks for those claims. So we've got some ongoing at the moment, and they do seem to be consistently going through at that rate.
Okay. So R&D stuff would cover what ordinarily? What would be legitimate?
Again, research and development is essentially where you take about and you put some kind of development into it that makes it better. I mean, for example, a very famous case was, for example, if you have a zip and you've got a specific design for it, anytime you spend in developing that kind of revision to that item, potentially can qualify for additional relief. In general, qualifying costs, you get an extra 130% of expenditure. So it's something that is massively worth looking at doing. Again, if your accountant doesn't have the expertise in-house, ask them, they can be put in touch with somebody else who does. Okay.
Christine, anything else that you would respond to?
No, I think Phil's covered everything.
Okay. And Jeanette, if you all look at this, I have just typed you some answers back. Your question's quite specific. So in that respect, what we've asked before and we'll ask again is if you could contact either your own accountant or either of the experts on this panel, and I'm sure they'll be more than happy to help you. Okay. Okay, so we have here a couple more. So okay, we've done a bit of self-employed stuff. I suppose, Phil, is there anything else with Christine that I haven't asked you that you could cover off around self-employed for those people that are watching? Is there anything in addition to that you might be able to give it, or do we think we've covered enough as to in terms of what's available as information to you both as professionals at the moment?
A major thing for me is HMRC have said they're going to be writing to people by the latest mid-May. I know some people who've had some correspondence through. Well, apparently they claim they've had some correspondence through, giving them details of how to claim if they believe they're eligible. However, I wouldn't be just going off that. I'd be speaking to your accountant now and saying, look, is this something I'm going to be able to claim on? And also, more importantly, will they be assisting you to do it?
Okay. Okay. Chris, anything that you would come back in with that, or would you like me to go through to the next question?
The other point on that. No, I think it's just one point on what Phil was saying there about HMRC writing, potentially writing to clients is there's obviously been a lot of fraudulent activity around. text messages, emails, etc. HMRC have said that they are unlikely to contact you using email, text, etc. And just be very aware of any messages or emails that you're getting asking for personal information, because they wouldn't ask for that information via the channels.
And what's interesting is they also do state they don't put links inside any of their emails or any of the text. So they might text or they might email, highly unlikely, but even if they did, even if they emailed, it would say, please log on to your, but it wouldn't have a link in there. So they'd expect you to go on your own independent link. So I think anyone could be forgiven for ignoring an email and just going straight onto their HMRC website and going on from there. So no following of links, no texting back, and no
providing personal information. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, thank you. So we've got a couple of other things. So how do I recover from this once the lockdown ends? So bit of a wide-reaching question. What would be some of the things that you as accountants and experts in this field would be doing? So are you going to be meeting with clients? Are you going to be giving them further advice? Are you going to be, I mean, I know there's business coaching from my point of view. I would have a different set of advice than you would do from a finance point of view. Christine, are there any kind of key things that you think people can be starting to get ready or prep?
I think ultimately this is going to be client-led to a great extent. For people that are self-employed, don't leave your tax returns for the current year too late. Bring your finances up to date. People quite often leave the self-assessment tax returns till February, January, right up to the deadline. That information's out of date then, so that's going to be no help to helping plan the forthcoming few weeks and months. So get your information brought up to date. If your accountant or bookkeeper deals with it for you, get it to them as soon as possible. I think we're going to see a shift in how work is brought into us as accountants and bookkeepers over the next few months. People are going to want things done perhaps sooner. So obviously that work's got to be scheduled in. Yeah. So don't leave it to the last minute. Just communicate. If you've got any issues or any questions, contact whoever provides that support for you and speak to them. And they can look at your personal situation then and act accordingly.
So actually then staying in contact with your accountant, staying in contact with your bookkeeper, staying in contact with whomever it is that is providing you with that accredited financial advice, more importantly, not just any old advice. I think you guys are still working, so you're still available to help people be in the best possible position for when the lockdown is lifted, when they can trade again, if the lockdown is extended. So this is really about, don't put that off, isn't it? Don't put off that, either a conversation or prepping your accounts or speaking to your accountant about what are the things you can do now that help you, I suppose, come out of this less flustered, stronger, and in a position to continue.
Absolutely.
To trade.
Yeah. I mean, now's the key time, isn't it? You've got a line in the sand as to where you were, and that's the starting point to look at where you're going to go in the future.
Okay. I've just got a question from Jeanette, another one, which is, has anyone been able to get through on the free phone helpline? So she gives a number that ends in 222. HMRC will not advise on the main phone number. So, they're going to be busy, aren't they? They're going to be absolutely stacked. So,
unfortunately, HMRC's phone system is a bit of a shamble. You won't get a main number, bluntly. Your best chance is going through your accountant, but they will not want to discuss a huge amount of the finances because they will want to ask very personal questions to the client and agreeing for time to pay arrangements, for example. A major problem with the systems they've got is a lot of them don't have a hold function either. They'll say, we can't deal with your call right now. Goodbye. After you've been on the phone going through automated messages for about 5 minutes, which I can imagine is very, very frustrating. My advice to them is if you know you have to make that call, if you can ask your accountant to at least initiate that for you. There was a time when I would get my client in, call the agent kind of lines to negotiate time to pay arrangements and get the client to give me authority. Whether or not that's something that accountants can do, I mean, I'm going to be trying, but it's got to be very difficult to do so. But it's like an insurance claim right now. It's like a travel insurance claim. It's like a
call to a council for a grant, there are people in front of that queue and everybody's asking the question. So I suppose patience is probably one of the key things that is required at this point.
Absolutely. They're also talking about redeploying people from other areas to help deal with the administration of this scheme and man the phones as calls start to come through. One thing that was in an article that I read, they were kind of saying if you can avoid contacting them at this time to do with the self-employment income support scheme, do so, because that's just going to have a knock-on effect and delay getting everything in place that they need to be able to get the scheme up and running. Obviously, they're going to be inundated with queries once those claim letters start going out to people, with people having queries on how things have been calculated and potentially disagreeing with the information that's being provided. So yeah, there will be a bigger team of people. It has been indicated to help support that, but I don't think it's in place at the minute. Okay, thank you. So
Jeanette, sorry, just like to know, so we've asked and answered that question. We can't predict who's going to pick the phone up. So Jeanette, I'm sorry we're not able to help you on that one, but ultimately things are being redeployed and the resources will grow. But at this point,
I was going to say the people who need to be calling. The people who need to be calling at this point are people with pre-existing arrangements, like a time to pay arrangements, or taxes that are not covered by the scheme. So, for example, pay-as-you-earn liabilities, corporation tax, any VAT prior to, I think it's any VAT between the 20th of March and the 30th of June. I think that's a rough day. Can be deferred. What I would say as well is do not forget to cancel your direct debit for your VAT if your VAT is due it's the 7th of May, isn't it? I think it's, yeah. If you do not cancel it, they will take it. They haven't got the systems to not recognise it. And once it's paid, I don't think you're going to be getting it back anytime soon.
Anyone who's ever paid money to HMRC knows it goes one bit faster than it does come back the other way. Yeah. Okay, and the question from Liz Dixon, which I think Liz we've probably already answered for you, but you may have missed the start of the session. But what if you only have 1 year's accounts for self-employed? So Christine, just very quickly, if we can just briefly reiterate what you've already given on that, just for Liz.
Okay, so providing it's the 18-19 years accounts and you've submitted a self-assessment tax return, they will base it on that year. So they will take 1/4 of that year's taxable income, and 80% of that is what we're expecting to be the claim amount. Obviously, that's to be confirmed as the scheme gets more established.
Okay.
If there's anyone who's watching who's thinking, oh, bloody hell, I haven't submitted my tax return for that year, they've said you've got until, I think, I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong, Christine, the 23rd of April to put that return in.
Right. So that's something that everyone could be doing right now to help improve their eligibility then, is to ensure that is being done.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're just going to come to the last kind of 1 or 2 questions now. You're welcome, Liz. Thank you. So the last couple of questions. What are company directors entitled to claim if they are unable to work due to their business being closed? What about dividends? I don't know so much what about dividends, but more around this. We've already discussed if you're a director or you're furloughed or you're not, but actually this is more around, okay, the business isn't operating. So furlough is, I suppose, is one aspect. Anything else? Phil, come to you first.
Unfortunately, at the moment, the furlough scheme applies to salary only. And most directors of limited companies for SMEs will be paid it was the 719, I think it's just gone up, which is the amount for national insurance, or maybe up to the personal allowance, up to 12 or 13 grand a year, which just isn't enough, sadly. Now, there's a huge amount of pressure on the government to it's going to be one of 3 things, isn't it? It's going to be either allowing them to start putting through a commercial salary. It's going to be extending the scheme to also apply to dividends paid from the company in addition to the salary that's taken, and the final thing may be on company profits. Those are the 3 options. What I would say is there's a number of petitions going around. Get your name on those petitions, and in the short term, any kind of committed expenses you've got for your house, like your mortgage. Another thing for cash flow, you may want to look at doing a personal budget as well on how much money is going out, because again, banks are giving 3-month mortgage holidays. I'd say apply for it if you need it. Apparently, there's no adverse impact to your credit. Other things like car repayments, don't just cancel them. Speak to the people and see what you can do if you're going to need it.
Okay, thank you. Christine, do you have anything to add to that point from Phil?
I think Phil's covered that perfectly.
Okay. So I haven't been employed for, I haven't been self-employed for the 3 years on which the self-employment grant is based. How will it affect my ability to claim the grant? I think, we're calling it a grant. It's not really, this is more around it. So I think, have we not covered that now? Probably pretty much in terms of 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, as long as that 1 year is the previous accounting year and not the year I'm currently in. Are we comfortable with that? Okay.
I would just add as well, which seems to be the case, this grant, it's not really payable, but it will form part of your income for the next tax year, and it will suffer tax and potentially national insurance as you would usually.
Which just feels like
yeah,
it's going down the rabbit hole, because that then gets taxed upon, but my brain kind of went, leave that till next time when it's talking about that bit.
Sorry.
Okay. And the only other bits, we've probably just got one about the 0 hours contracts and staff that fall under 0 hours. We did answer this last time, and Christine did answer some stuff around this last time. I'm just wondering if there is anything else that has been clarified on behalf of the government where it comes to people who have, unfortunately, only got a 0 hours contract.
Sorry, Ruth, I missed all of that because it froze on me for about 30 seconds.
Okay, right, sorry. So 0 hours contracts was a point of interest, wasn't it, last time? About those people that have a 0 hours contract and whether or not that applies to them from a funding, from an 80% a furlough point of view. Just to clarify how that's impacting people now compared to whatever advice we gave last time, is there anything different for people to be aware of, Christine?
So 0 hours contracts are covered by the furlough scheme. Now, typically, if people are paid a salary, they're basing the furlough scheme on the February salary, the February payroll. Obviously, with people on 0 hours contracts, they'll have varied hours over a period of time. So their furlough pay is going to be based on an average of that time. So if they've worked for the full tax year 1920, it will be based on the average to February. If they've only worked for a few months in that tax year, it will be based on the average, based on that number of weeks or months within that period. So they will be entitled to claim 80%, the employers, on behalf of their employees on 0 hour contracts.
So if you're on a 0 hours contract and you've been working for them for 6 months, your average earning is over that 6. If it's 9, it's over that 9, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
You're over that 12.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, well, we're just at 2 o'clock, so we're going to finish up. Christine, if anybody wants to contact you with regards to help and advice after this, can you just remind people of your contact details and website, or how you best want people to contact you?
Yeah, so you just Google the Accounts Matter website, so it'll be www.accountsmatters.co.uk. You can email me on christine@accountsmatters.co.uk. And at the moment, I'm working from my mobile, which is 07528 780 985. You can contact me on any of those.
Fantastic. And we'll put those contact details in terms of on the video, so people will know that as well. Thank you very much for that. Phil, if you could just remind people of how they can get in contact with you.
Yeah, sure. The best way to contact me is probably at my email address, which is just phil with 1 L @blend.accountants. My mobile number at the moment is 07540 874 120.
Okay, 874 120.
That's right, yeah.
Superb. Okay. Well, all just remains for me to thank you very much for giving up your time and expertise for that hour. We have this time next week got another session with Gail and with Janet. So Gail Escombe from Legal Services and Janet Whitworth from Whitworth Consulting Limited for HR and legal advice. And we have also, in fact, next week or the week after, the two lots of sessions, we've also got protection for insurance, investments and cover. So that's also part, and that's with Annabelle and Tanya from TP Financial Solutions, with Nicola Coombe from Morecambe Bay Wilson Estates, and with Nicola McGrath from, I think I pronounced that right, from Guy Penn Reed Hamilton Insurers as well. So there's more of these sessions that will continue to happen over the coming weeks, but they'll be at the same time each week. So Wednesday at 1 o'clock. Well, thank you very much indeed to both of you. And I know that you've both got a load of work to go and do. So I really appreciate you helping, and we will see you again soon.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers,
Bye
thanks.
now.
Bye. Bye.